So, one topic on the internet political discourse this week came from an article written by the Washington Post. It was written by the editorial board of the Washington Post, and it talked about how politics is affecting dating. And I thought there was a lot of interesting points within this article, and I'll get to some of the meta commentary on the article itself later in this segment. But first, I want to start off with this. I think everyone can agree that we have become a more political society over the past decade or so. And that has drastically impacted the dating pool. We'll pop up a graphic here on the screen, but the divide among young people politically is incredibly gendered. Women are getting more liberal and men are getting more conservative. And this is creating a lot of conflicts in the dating pool. Not on this segment, but earlier, TJ had talked about how people are having sex less. And while this isn't the only part of it, it is part of it. And it is not just a silly thing because, like it or not, not everyone has to be married, but there's study after study that has shown that marriage, on average, allows people to live happier, longer, healthier lives for a variety of reasons. And a society with strong bonds of marriage does tend to perform better than one that doesn't. So this is a societal issue, not just a culture war phenomenon to debate about. Now, the question that is posed by this article, and I'm going to read the end of the article here so you guys get the summary. It goes, the marriage dilemma reflects a broader societal one. Whether people can find ways to adopt a new normal of ideological and political polarization instead of hoping, against all evidence, that it will dissipate. Unfortunately, Americans have not equipped themselves to discuss, debate, and reason across these divides. Americans have increasingly sorted themselves according to ideological orientation. They are working, living, and socializing with people who think the same things they do. Particularly on college campuses, a culture of seeking sameness has set up young Americans for disappointment. They expect people to share their own convictions and commitments, but people's insights and understanding about the world often come from considering alternative perspectives that may at first seem odd or offensive. Gen Z is still relatively young, and Trump-era divisions between single men and women might yet reverse themselves. But there's a good chance they won't, particularly if Mr. Trump manages to inject the body politic with his distinct brand of existential dread during and after the 2024 elections. It is worth thinking both ahead of and beyond Mr. Trump. A cultural shift might be necessary, one that views politics as a part of people's identity, but far from the most important part. America's ability to live together, quite literally, might depend on it. So my question to the group is this. One, is this, political divides making marriages and relationships much more difficult and less likely, a problem? And B, do you agree with the Washington Post recommendation for stopping it of making politics a less important part of our identity and dating preferences? TJ, I'll throw to you first because you didn't have as many opportunities to talk on the last segment.
Oh no, it's fine. Trust me, I get plenty the other day. So my first thought was they're saying there's a problem because young men are veering right and young women are veering left, and that's going to cause problems for relationships. And the easy solution to this is just be gay. I mean, there you go, problem solved. You don't have to worry about anything at all. I mean, and that's the easy one. And the second takeaway I got from this was they kept dancing around the point that the liberals are the problem. Like that was the point of the article. It was because they made a big point out of saying that something like 7 out of 10 liberals say that they wouldn't date someone with opposing views. They didn't specify which views they were, because there's some important ones, like we're not going to, agree to disagree on the fact of should poor people starve to death. That's a pretty big one. So yeah, I don't expect you to date someone outside that preference. But the one part I wanted to draw attention to was the fact that it says that women are becoming more educated, more liberal, and they're earning more money. On the other hand, young men are becoming more conservative, and they're becoming less educated, less employable, suffering from addiction and risks of suicide. It's like, okay, I think I see the problem here. I mean, correlation isn't necessarily causation, but it seems like conservatism is playing a pretty big part in making men's lives worse. So why are we blaming the liberals who are deciding, hey, I'd rather not date a conservative when, the conservative pathway is leading to worse results? That's kind of how I was viewing it. Lynn, what do you think, what you saw?
I well, for one, you have a situation where if you're discussing, the development of women over time, there were times where women didn't have rights, they weren't able to vote, they weren't able to have bank accounts. I mean, their life completely depended and revolved around the man in their life, and now that's changed. But I also think that in regard to politics, I think the fundamental values that you hold do have to be aligned with the person that you're choosing to spend your life with or your time with. We might be able to disagree on certain things, politically. Maybe you feel differently about infrastructure than I do, and maybe we could disagree about that. But if fundamentally, if I'm, really, if a fundamental piece of what my identity is conflicting with what you're saying to me, then of course we're not going to align, right? At the end of the day, if I feel that everybody should have rights and you don't, if I feel that I'm a pro-life person or I'm a pro-choice person and you're a pro-life person, and to the point where you like to get into debates with me about it, of course those are going to be off-putting things, because those are fundamental values that are aligning with who I am as a person. And so maybe conservatism is going back into a space where, necessarily women, like, they don't want to be in that space. Like you said, women are more educated and have grown into all these different spaces, and that has become threatening. But to make it seem like just Republican versus Democrat, or liberal, versus conservative, I don't think it's that. I think that the politics of the fundamental values of the individuals have to align.
I agree with Lynn on some of those perspectives around fundamental values. So let's look at probably one of the biggest, most polarizing issues as of late, which is abortion. I think in a relationship, it would be very difficult for a man and a woman with polar opposite views on abortion to make that work if it comes to a head in terms of making a decision about a pregnancy, right? That's kind of a huge shift. I mean, I've been married over 14 years and I have 3 children. I am very, and I've had a vasectomy so that I can't have any more children because they are expensive, and 3 is plenty for me. But if something were to happen and my wife were to get pregnant, even though I am pro-choice, as in a woman should have the right to choose because of privacy issues, health, we would not choose to get an abortion. Right. Because to us, it just doesn't seem, it doesn't fit with what we would want to do. Mm-hmm. Right. And so, and it's like that unrealized potential of what that life could be, but it is not my decision to do that for other people. And so exactly. I think if you look at just the core abortion issue, you need to align on that. I mean, obviously, let's dispel the fact that let's assume both parties are not racist, they're not homophobic, or they support people living their lives. Let's assume those characteristics. Neither one's a Nazi. Let's assume those characteristics are already laid bare. Just thinking about something as fundamental as pro-life versus, or pro-birth versus pro-choice, that alone, I think, is an impossible gap to overcome, because that is such a fundamental part of a relationship, right?
And you can find someone who believes in pro-life. There are tons of people that are pro-birth, but trying to impose, especially if it's from a male's perspective, right? Mm-hmm. Trying to impose that view onto a woman who is pro-choice, it doesn't even make sense, because at the end of the day, she has to choose to bring that. The baby is not, it's not here until she lets it grow to become a human and bursts it out. Mm-hmm. So that's a part of it. So I agree with you completely. Like, those two things can't not be aligned. And even if you ignore it for as long as possible, you might ignore it and say, mm-hmm. hey, we'll never talk about that topic until it happens. And then you're talking about that topic,
I think most of the other issues, like, TJ talking about no, poor people shouldn't starve. If someone's coming at me with, like, it's their own damn fault. I don't care. If people lack empathy, I mean, yes,
Whole
we
other
tend to
issue.
align that's a whole other issue, right?
Yeah.
Granted, in terms of economic standing, we do tend to align that more with a conservative play, but let's try not to align the extremes. I really do think it comes down to just typically, especially in terms of dating and relationships, that one topic is probably one of the biggest ones that to me would be insurmountable. I think everything else can be worked through.
Yeah,
Even atheist versus not, you know?
So I'm gonna just poll the room real quick here. Imagine whatever's your current relationship status, Dan, you're no longer married with 3 kids. Everyone's back single on the dating market.
Party? No, sorry.
Whether you are or not, but like just put yourself in that position. Could you see yourself dating, you know, all else being equal, someone with the opposite political views that you have? I'll start with you.
No.
Lynn, never mind. Lynn got it first. She says no.
I mean, just no. I mean, me personally, I'm too passionate about it. I'm too passionate about my views. And I would prefer to be with someone who either understands and aligns with my views, or with someone who's just as passionate about their views. And we align in that way. But I don't think that it's going to give longevity. It'll just be something that you don't talk about until it comes up at a friend's house or at Thanksgiving or something that and then you'll see you guys bumping heads for no reason other than you didn't talk enough about what your fundamental values are as individuals, and deciding that is important in moving forward and not only developing a life together, but raising children together. At some point you're going to have children, you're going to add that to this equation. And how are we going to raise them? We have to have a good idea of how we want to do that. And I just think that if you're not aligned in those ways, like I said, if it's not something serious, but if we're talking about serious, political differences, we're going to have to align, or this isn't going to work. And that's okay, because there's someone out there for you that will align with what you feel and believe.